You're tuned into the Spot Up Pod, the official podcast of the Spot Up Shot newsletter. I'm your host, Paul Garcia. In today's episode, some unfortunate news for the Spurs, with Wemby and Coach Pop having to miss the remainder of the season. The Spurs' first 3 games post All-Star break to fight for the play-in or tank. Previewing the upcoming 4 games for this week. So unfortunately for the San Antonio Spurs, they were dealt some tough news last week after I had recorded the last episode of the Spot Up Pod. And so let's just jump right into this tough news for the Spurs regarding Wemby and Coach Pop. Let's begin with Wemby. So as you've heard on Thursday, the team announced that Wemby is going to miss the remainder of the regular season with a deep vein thrombosis in his right shoulder, which is basically a blood clot in his shoulder. Coach Johnson, the night of that game, after the game before the game took place, when he was asked about Wemby's health, he basically said that Wemby's health long term, there's no concern for his health long term, and then there's also no reason to believe that he won't be ready to go for the start of next season. So that's some positive news regarding Wemby's diagnosis with that blood clot. Some reporters also echo this positive news in terms of saying that it's not going to be a Chris Bosh situation. Doesn't look like that. It's going to be more so like a case that Brandon Ingram had, where he had a blood clot in his shoulder area in 2019, where he had to miss the rest of the season in March that year, but then he came back and started the next year for the Pelicans. And then also All-Star Thompson, though his was more so in the leg area, it wasn't in the shoulder area. All-Star Thompson of the Detroit Pistons, he too was diagnosed with the blood clot last season, and he was out for 8 months. But by November, he was back, and we saw that he was. If you watched that rookie sophomore game a few weeks ago, we saw that All-Star Thompson could still get up, get in the air. And so again, that's what we're hoping for, is that Wemby makes a full recovery and that he's ready to go by the start of next season. Unfortunately for Wemby, he was obviously having a great sophomore season, putting up some insane numbers each night in and night out, especially defensively. So because he only played in 46 games this season, he's not going to meet the 65-game minimum criteria to qualify for postseason awards, because we know that he was probably a lock to win the Defensive Player of the Year award. He was probably going to also make an all-defensive team again, and then also potentially get into the All-NBA conversation in one of those spots as well. But unfortunately, because he has to miss the rest of the season, he's not going to be able to be eligible for those postseason awards. However, I wrote about this over the weekend. When I was looking at his block numbers where he ended the season, he still leads the league with 176 blocks. And basically, the 2 players behind him in total blocks were Walker Kessler and Brook Lopez. And as I did their projections, they're probably not going to catch Wemby from what I'm seeing, unless they have some crazy nights with like 5 or 6 blocks a few times this season. If they just stick to their averages, which is about 2 blocks each per game, they're not going to reach Wemby's 76 blocks, which again just tells you the kind of defense that Wemby was playing, that monster defense he had out there on the floor, and just the fact that he left the season and just have only 46 games with 176 blocks, and it looks like right now, early on, no one's going to probably catch that number for now to the rest of the season. So again, just some very unfortunate news for Wemby, especially because he was having a really strong start to his sophomore career. But again, you just hope that everything goes well and he gets back to 100% health, and that the blood clot issue goes away for his future of his career, and also that he's able to start playing again early next season. Now, I was asked about this question, and I also wrote about it on the spotupshot.com. It was usually when a player is out for the rest of the season, a team is allowed to apply for what's called the disabled player exception, where the league allows the team to open up a roster spot and also sign someone or trade for someone for it, since that player is out for the rest of the season. But unfortunately for the Spurs, this situation. This date, should I say, had already passed. It was January 15th was the last time they could have applied for the DPE. Obviously, they just found out last week that he had this blood clot issue. So again, they had no way of knowing that was going to happen in the future. So again, they did miss that window from January 15th, so they cannot apply for the DPE, the disabled player exception, to add an extra roster spot, since Wemby's going to miss the final 27 games of the season. Keeping up with the same disappointing news was a report by Shams Charania of ESPN on Saturday. Shams reported on Saturday evening that Coach Pop is expected to miss the rest of the regular season as well. After he suffered that mild stroke back in early November. He's obviously been out since that time frame. Shams did say though that that's there's the Pop's situation as far as long-term coaching, if he's going to return to the bench, is still, it remains uncertain. Again, that's kind of where everything stands with Coach Pop. He is going to miss the rest of the season. Some good news, according to Shams, is that Pop has been in constant communication with Wemby since Wemby was diagnosed with that blood clot issue. And then also Shams reported that Pop is also progressing in his own recovery, and he's also getting stronger, according to Shams. So again, Pop isn't going to be back on the sideline, according to these reports, for the rest of this season. And then lastly, Charles Bassey, the Spurs' backup center, also returned to the injury report, where his name is on the injury report again. What happened was he did come back on Friday against the Detroit Pistons, and he played the full game. But then on Sunday against the New Orleans Pelicans, he ended up getting hurt again, where in the third quarter, the team issued a press release saying that he was going to miss the remainder of the game with left knee soreness. Well, then on Tuesday, the team put out their injury report for their game on Wednesday in New Orleans, and now they're saying that Bassey is out with a left knee acute on chronic bone bruise. So again, Bassey again continues to deal with these unfortunate injuries as well. He had just come back. He had missed a lot of games right before the All-Star break, and so now he's back on the injured list. And as far as just some relief for the Spurs missing, Wemby, missing Bassey for the rest for right now. They did sign Bismack Biyombo to his second 10-day contract back on Friday. So again, Biyombo's on his second 10-day contract. He's currently the Spurs' starting center. After this contract, though, once that contract runs out, that 10 days, the Spurs, if they want to keep him on the roster, they actually need to sign him to a rest of season contract. So again, that's kind of where the team stands. Unfortunately, with this tough news for the Spurs that's been happening, in regards to Coach Pop, and then regards to Wemby, and then also, just lately, Bassey too has been having some difficulty staying on the court due to injuries. All right, so now let's move on to the games that took place this past week. So let's look at the Spurs' first 3 games since returning from the All-Star break. So let's go back to Thursday. The Spurs are in Austin, Texas, hosting the Phoenix Suns. So this is considered a home game for the Spurs, and this was right after the news came out about Wemby having to miss the rest of the season. The Suns were favored by 2.5 points, and the Spurs did a great job in this game. They jumped out early to a 16-point lead in the first half. The Suns did come back and at least tied the game, but they never took the lead. And then in the fourth quarter, De'Aaron Fox really took over, scoring 11 of his 26 points there in the fourth quarter. The Spurs did a great job of basically keeping that separation from Phoenix, where they never let the game get down to crunch time, and they ended up winning pretty comfortably by 11 points. Fox ends up with 26 points, as I mentioned. Not only that, a lot of Spurs players got points on the board. So 7 different Spurs players scored in double figures in this game. And then of their 9 players who are active in this game, 8 of those players, 9 of the Spurs players active in the game scored 8 or more points against the Suns' defense, was having some major issues in that game against San Antonio's offense. The Spurs did a great job in winning the turnover battle, and then also forcing the Suns into turnovers. And then, of course, they also did a good job of winning the rebounding battle as well, as 2 of their key factors. Rookie Stephon Castle off the bench, he finishes with 10 points and 10 rebounds, which recorded his first career double-double. So after beating Phoenix on Thursday, the Spurs then had a back-to-back set against the Detroit Pistons, and on Friday also in Austin, Texas. This was a tough game for the Spurs, and it kind of leads into where they've left off here in these last 2 games. So the Pistons, I will say, have been a better ball club this year. So they were a 4.5-point favorite. It was also their first game back from the All-Star break, so they definitely had fresh legs out there, whereas the Spurs were on the second out of a back-to-back. And early on, Detroit really jumped out on San Antonio early. Then the Spurs actually came back. They took the lead and led by as many as 10 points in that first half. However, in the third quarter, the Pistons completely took control. They outscored the Spurs there in the third quarter. And then basically going into the fourth, the Spurs were down. They were in a 21-point hole, and they ended up losing by 15 points, where basically like 3:20 left on the clock in the fourth. Both coaches emptied their benches. De'Aaron Fox carried the starters in the scoring department with 27 points, and basically every other starter really struggled to score the ball in this game. Devin Vassell finishes with just 6 points. Chris Paul only adds 3 points. Bismack Biyombo, the recent signed player for the center role, finishes with 2 points, and then Harrison Barnes had 0 points, which was just I think it was like the 12th or 13th time in his career that he's ever recorded a scoreless game. Off the bench, Keldon Johnson did a great job with 28 points off the bench as the leading scorer for the Spurs, but other players had some difficulty scoring off the bench as well. And what was notable in that game was that Stephon Castle only played 13 minutes, where he basically played a big chunk of minutes in the first quarter, about 6.5. Then in the second quarter, he barely got any minutes. The third quarter only got like 2 minutes, and then he didn't play at all in the fourth quarter, despite the Pistons having that huge lead. And then basically, what were the Spurs' issues? Basically, rebounding was the big issue for the Spurs. They just could not keep the Pistons out of the paint and then off the glass in that game. Then the most recent loss for the Spurs came on Sunday. They are back on the rodeo road trip on the road at New Orleans against the Pelicans for the second time this season. They're playing the Pelicans. The Pelicans, I will say, were favored by 2 despite missing DeJounte Murray and Herb Jones. The Spurs started off really well in the first half. They led by 17 points in the first, as many as 17 points in the first half. And then whenever they lead by 15 or more points this season, they had only lost 2 games all season. But then the second half came in, especially the fourth quarter. So in the third quarter, the Pelicans win that quarter. But then in the fourth quarter, the Spurs just go super cold shooting the basketball. They get outscored 39-17 there in the fourth quarter. In the entire second half, the Spurs only made 13 shots. The Pelicans lead basically in the fourth got as high as 21. They ended up winning comfortably by 18 points. The Spurs, like I said, struggled to shoot the ball 29% from 3 as a team, yet they had to keep taking threes because over half their shots did come from 3. Keldon has a strong game off the bench with 18 points, continuing to attack, get to the free throw line. Julian Champagnie also had a strong game with 18 points off the bench as well, but a lot of his damage came in the first half where he made 5 threes before halftime. Harrison Barnes, like I mentioned, he had a scoreless game against Detroit. Well, then he bounces back with 13 points amongst the starters in this game. And then Bismack Biyombo, in just his third or fourth game with the Spurs, he records a double-double with 10 points, 10 rebounds, and 4 blocks. But despite the 4 blocks, the Pelicans continued to attack inside, as I'm going to talk about here. Fox struggled a little bit shooting the ball in this game. Devin Vassell had another rough game, 5 points on 1 of 9 shooting. Chris Paul struggled, 4 points, and then Castle 2 points, and then Jeremy Sohan 4 points as well. So basically, a lot of players for the Spurs struggled to make shots. What was notable though that I mentioned was that. Now that Wemby's out, and obviously teams know this for these last 27 games of the season, they're going to start attacking over and over relentlessly in the paint. And that's what we saw New Orleans do. That's what we also saw Detroit do as well, where the Pelicans took 61% of their shots in the paint, and that is now a new opponent season high for a Spurs opponent. And then also the Pistons took over half their shots in the paint as well. And what's happening is that, these teams are taking all these shots in the paint, but then also they're having more active bodies there near the glass. And of course, that's leading to an issue for the Spurs, is that they're undersized right now. Missing Wemby, missing Bassey as well, even though Bassey's not the height of like a traditional center. And so they're getting attacked on the glass, on the offensive glass. I'm having a lot of trouble there. And then 2-point scoring in that game because of the Pelicans' volume of paint scoring that ended up being a huge issue for San Antonio. So again, it's only been 3 games without Wemby, but again, that's going to see something that we just see is that teams are going to start attacking the Spurs inside, because we had seen the numbers where when Victor's on the floor, they were teams wouldn't go inside as often, but then the minute he sat down to get some rest, they were going to start attacking the Spurs, very aggressively. Well, now he's not on the floor at all, so of course we're going to start to see that take place, that pattern of teams trying to attack more inside, getting offensive rebounds. So that's something the Spurs will have to deal with. One of the players who's off to a good start post All-Star break is Keldon Johnson. I do want to say mention him, is that off the bench, he's still coming off the bench even despite Wemby being out, where he's averaging right now in these last 3 games 20 points, 77% shooting, basically making everything inside the paint area, and then also he's shooting well from 3. He doesn't take a lot of threes, like 2.5 basically, but he's making 63% of them, and then he's also getting himself to the foul line. I'm struggling a little bit more there at the foul line, 67% shooting, but again remaining aggressive, and we definitely see more aggression from him. I will note though that he's seeing an increase in minutes now too as well. His minutes are back up to 26 minutes a night in these last 3 games. So Keldon is definitely taking advantage of his time. He's coming in, being an instant spark plug, scoring the ball, whether in the half court, attacking on drives, or out on the fast break. He's finding ways to get himself involved. And so Keldon has definitely been more aggressive in these last 3 games post All-Star break. But then on the flip side, a player who's really struggling right now coming out of All-Star break is Devin Vassell. Like I mentioned, his performances in some of the other games. Right now in the last 3 games, he's only averaging 8 points, shooting 27% from the floor, 15% from 3, and 100% from the foul line. But only getting 2 free throw attempts per game. And then even like his ball movement is having some issues here. 0.3 assists to 0.7 turnovers in these 3 games. Again, it's a 3-game sample size, but it kind of follows what I mentioned last last week, where Devin's just had a very kind of up and down season. It just hasn't been consistent for him. And so again, this is one of those times where, Wemby's out, and so the Spurs are looking for those players, who've gotten some of these contract extensions, have been on the team for a while, to kind of step up now, and help De'Aaron Fox out there, who's the key, the go-to scorer now. And so right now, Keldon's definitely doing a great job of coming in and helping Fox out by being that secondary playmaker. But Devin's really struggling in these first three games. It's just kind of been a pattern for him this season since he returned back in, I think it was like November, or early December when he was coming back from injury. So we know that he's kind of had a rocky season, where even like his role, where he comes back from the foot injury later in the season, so that it had already started. He plays off the bench for a while, then he becomes a starter, and he had he's had moments where he's had like 2 or 3 good stretches of like 4 or 5 games of good basketball, but then he just kind of completely struggles, and that's kind of where he's at again, where he's in one of these struggling phases. And so again, that's just something to watch with Devin. And like I mentioned last week, when you get the contract extension, there are expectations. And so again, even when the Spurs really need him right now, he's struggling at this moment, especially with Victor out, with plenty of opportunity now there in the offense as well, for someone to kind of step up and help out De'Aaron Fox. And obviously we see Keldon's done a great job of that, but it's been a tough time for Devin in these first 3 games post All-Star break. So my prediction from last week was, I thought the Spurs would go 2-1. I thought they would beat the Suns and the who was it? The Pelicans, and they only beat the Suns. They didn't beat the Pelicans. They lost to the they didn't beat the Pistons or the Pelicans. So again, 1 and 2, and then Vegas, though, is, now that they're without Wemby, they're going to pretty much be underdogs in a lot of their games going forward. So Vegas did have them going 0 and 3 as underdogs, and they ended up going 1 and 2 in these last 3 games. Let's keep going. All right, so for the main topic of this episode, I want to look at the Spurs' questions here. Here's the key question. It's like, to fight for a play-in spot or to tank, basically, to look at the lottery odds situation. So let's first talk about continuing the fight for the play-in path, because right now that is what the Spurs are doing. They're not purposely resting players or having players sit out. They have all their core rotation players that are healthy still in these games, still fighting to try to win each game every night that they're out there, which means that they are trying to still get into this play-in tournament. So let's just see where they're at right now. So they're currently 24 and 31 after the loss to New Orleans, which is the 7 games under 500, which is the furthest they've been from 500 this season. As I'm recording this, as of 9 p.m. Central Time, they are 3.5 games behind the Sacramento Kings, who are 10th in the play-in spot at 28 and 28, and they're 2 games behind the Phoenix Suns, who are 11th at 27 and 30. So again, that's kind of where they stand as of 9 p.m. Central Time on Monday. If those teams played and they either won or lost, that's why the records are different. Now, 3.5 games, doesn't sound like a lot, like a bunch. But then when we look at the long-term view, that's where it looks like a very challenging road ahead for San Antonio if they want to try to make the play-in tournament. So the Kings, let's just say, because right now they're playing 500 ball, if they end up the season going 41-41, a 500 record, the Spurs right now in their final 27 need to go 18-9 the rest of the way. So again, this team is really struggling right now, and they're being tasked with having to go 18-9 to get into the play-in tournament. That's a huge obstacle in front of them. That would be to end the season with the 42-40 record. Not only that, according to Positive Residual, they now have the 3rd toughest record left in the league. So again, right now it's a huge challenge for them to get into this play-in tournament. But again, the lineups that they're putting out right now, it still signals that they're trying to win these games, that they're trying to at least get on the right footing and getting some wins to try to get back in this play-in picture. But right now it's been really tough. Again, especially losing a 17-point lead to the worst team in the West by record, which was the Pelicans there on Sunday. Now, if the Spurs cannot get into the play-in tournament, well, then obviously the next route to look at is the lottery picture. And so this is where it starts to get a little bit more interesting because of just the situation they're facing, where they've lost their best player. Wemby's out for the rest of the season. And, there's a chance, though, that if they continue losing some of these games, they're going to be able to improve their lottery odds. So let's just look at where they're at right now in the lottery path, or the lottery place, again, as of 9 p.m. Central Time on Monday evening. So they're currently 10th in lottery odds, which means that gives them a 14% chance at a top 4 pick in the lottery, and also a 3% chance at number 1. Here's the thing: they're not too far behind or ahead of some of the teams that are to basically improve their lottery odds. They're not too far ahead of some of these teams. So let me just say where they're at as of 9 p.m. Monday. They are just 1 game in front of the Portland Trailblazers, who have the 9th lottery odds. They are 2.5 games in front of the Chicago Bulls, who have the 8th lottery odds. They are 4 games in front of the Brooklyn Nets, who have the 7th lottery odds. And then they're 5 games in front of the Philadelphia 76ers, who have the 6th odds. And here's the difference between going from like 10th to being able to move up to like 6th. If the Spurs were to be able to get it to like that 6th range lottery odds, they would be able to their chance of getting a top 4 pick now increases from, what did I say, 14% chance to now 37% chance. And then also the chance of getting the number 1 pick improves from 3% chance at 10th to now a 9% chance at number 1. And so the reason why I say 6, it might be the goal here if they're going to start tanking or losing, end up losing games, is because the Wizards, the Pelicans, the Jazz, the Hornets, and the Raptors, those teams are going to be I think they're going to be the bottom 5 teams. I mean, they're pretty far away from the Spurs, so I don't think the Spurs can catch those teams. So again, that's why I think that if the Spurs start looking at, the lottery, 6 might be like their goal, or they might be able to get there. Who knows? So again, that one's more, kind of still kind of close in route. Now, one player to watch here, a veteran player on the Spurs team, is Chris Paul. So right now, obviously, we do see that Chris is still a part of the team where he's starting in every game. As of Wednesday, he's expected, of course, play against the Pelicans and the Spurs' next game because he's not on the injury report. But the reason why I'm talking about Chris Paul is because he is a veteran player where he's going to be a free agent next summer, and there is that question of, do the Spurs want to have a conversation with him about possibly looking at a buyout or getting waived, and then maybe that gives him a chance to go finish the season with a playoff level team. Or again, does he want to stick around with San Antonio past Thursday? And I'll tell you a little bit why Thursday is important, and just continue this path. Whether the Spurs make the plan or they just end up as a lottery team, just being the starting point guard, getting his time to kind of teach the young players out there, still getting a starting spot there for the Spurs. So again, that's a conversation the Spurs need to have with Paul, if they're going to have that conversation. I'm not saying they're going to have that conversation, but if they want to look at that, and Paul wants to look at that, then Thursday is a key date. And here's why Thursday is a key date. On March 1st, this coming Saturday, that is the playoff eligibility deadline. So basically, that means that if a veteran player wants to play on a playoff team, they need to be waived by no later than Thursday. And the reason why Thursday is the key date is because once they're waived, that player, they have to wait 48 hours on the waiver wire, and then once they clear waivers, then they're free agent. They can sign with them, with the playoff level team. So again, that's why Thursday, I think, is the key date to watch here with regards to Chris Paul. But again, there's been no reporting that he and the Spurs are looking at a buyout right now. And again, just the direction that the team is in right now, the fact that he's playing in all these games. Again, he's ready. He's expected to play on Wednesday against New Orleans. Shows that that a buyout right now as of Monday night does not look very likely. But again, we'll see. There's still 72 hours till that time gets here. Also, De'Aaron Fox, if the Spurs are going to look at maybe possibly, looking more so at tanking and improving their lottery odds, De'Aaron Fox is a player to watch because we do know that he entered with the Spurs with it's like a broken pinky finger. And so basically it looks like he might need offseason surgery to get that taken care of in the offseason. But again, if the Spurs know that they're probably not going to make the play-in tournament, it's probably best to have Fox take care of that surgery if it's needed early on during the season now, and then that way he's able to recover quicker and be ready to go for next season. So again, I haven't seen a reporting yet that that's going to happen either with Fox, but just because of the path that the Spurs are on right now, it looks more likely that they're going to end up in the lottery rather than ending up there in the play-in tournament. And so again, right now, as of Monday evening, the Spurs are going ahead as if they're trying to win these games against the to stay in the play-in race, because they do have all healthy players available ready to go against the Pelicans on Wednesday. If you have a chance, make sure to visit the spotupshot.com, the newsletter. So I have 2 features up there from this past week. So the first one's called Coach Pop Not Expected to Return for Remainder of Season, Wemby Season Highs, and more. And so basically in this article, I basically, discussed what happened with Coach Pop. Unfortunately, that he's going to have to miss the rest of the season. But then I also went back and looked at some of Victor's season high numbers that he posted this season in all sorts of different statistical categories. And I attached some film clips as well. I also looked at some offensive sets for De'Aaron Fox, where he got a DHO a corner 3 from a Bismack Biyombo screen, where he went coast to coast against the Detroit Pistons. And then also how the Spurs are using an offensive set called the Horns action to get kind of a double screen high up top to let Fox kind of confuse the defense and figure out how he wants to get into the paint. So again, I wrote up I put some film together on Fox on that piece, and then also I looked at why Castle didn't play. Why he only played 13 minutes against the Pistons. It kind of confused me. He's a rookie. He's going to make some mistakes, but he didn't make a lot of mistakes in that game. But again, he didn't play a lot, and so that was a little bit I was just a little confused after that game why he didn't get as many minutes. And then also my other feature that I wrote this past week was called De'Aaron Fox on the Importance of Winning the Possession Game. And this is basically coming up from, I think it was a Wednesday or Tuesday interview for De'Aaron Fox before the Spurs played in Austin, where he basically talked about the importance of what he calls the possession game, which is basically the key is winning the rebounding battle, winning the turnover battle, and then also winning the free throw battle, and how that's kind of been a point of emphasis that he's wanted from the Spurs. Unfortunately, these comments were made before the Spurs and Fox found out about Victor's situation where he was going to be out for the rest of the season. But that's just something interesting to look at, how Fox is kind of looking at some of these numbers. And so I put some data together from the Spurs, where they are exactly in those different areas. And that's also something that I've been continuing to monitor in my writing after each game is, did the Spurs win the possession battle, the rebounds, the turnovers, and the free throws? So again, that's over on the spotupshot.com. All right, so now before I close this episode, let's go to preview the upcoming 4 games for this week for the Spurs. So on Tuesday, they return to action in New Orleans for a baseball series, basically against the Pelicans, where they're going to play New Orleans again. The Pelicans are last out west as of 9 p.m. Monday evening. They are 2-8 in their last 10 games. However, one of those 2 wins is against the Spurs. I am still going to say the Spurs win this game. So again, right now, I know they just lost to the Pelicans, but I'm going to go ahead and say that they win this game because the rest of the week's going to be pretty rough for them. So let's see who else they have. Then on Wednesday, on the second night of back-to-back, the Spurs travel to Houston. They are playing the Rockets, who are 5th out west. The Rockets are 3-7 in their last 10 games, but I still don't think the Spurs, are going to be able to win this game. So I'm going to go with the Rockets in this one. Then on Saturday, the Spurs have a pretty tough schedule ahead this weekend. They continue on the road, their final game of the rodeo road trip, where they travel to Memphis, who the Grizzlies have beat the Spurs twice already this season. And the Grizzlies are a very good team. They're 2nd out west. They are 6-4 in the last 10 games. And so because the Spurs are on the road against a team they haven't beaten, even with Wemby, I'm going to go ahead and say loss for the Spurs in this one. And then on Sunday, the Spurs get to come home to San Antonio to play a home game finally. They end the rodeo road trip, but against the best team in the Western Conference. So that's the Oklahoma City Thunder. Their Spurs are hosting them on Sunday. The Thunder, of course, are 1st out west. They are 9-1 in their last 10 games. And so that's a very daunting task to beat the Thunder. So I'm going to go ahead and say loss, unfortunately, for the Spurs. So my prediction for this coming week is 1-3. Again, it's a very tough schedule for San Antonio, especially without Wemby and especially, just coming off a loss to the Pelicans. And so again, that conversation, should this happen, let's just say they go 1-3, that conversation we're talking about here about, looking at the play-in or the lottery, it's going to be even more clear by the end of this week, where if they go 1-3 in these next 4 games, they're going to basically be 25-34 with 23 games left. Again, 9 games under 500. So again, it's starting to look again, if that happens, those lottery odds that lottery path probably looks more, more likely for San Antonio. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of the Spot Up Pod. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a rating on your favorite podcast apps and our YouTube channel. The Spot Up Pod is recorded and produced by Paul Garcia. The music for this episode was written by Vincent Garcia and Paul Garcia. Thank you for listening and have a great day.